The National News Desk. Locally covered, nationally connected.
I suspect I'll be the only Democrat that will vote yes for the Republican version, too, because I refuse to be a part of voting to shut our government down.
The risk for a government shutdown sharp. Increasing after lawmakers fail to agree on a spending plan. More on the deadlock in Congress now on break until days before that October. The raging waters. Good evening. I'm Taylor Murray. Welcome to the National News Desk, America's News Now. From trade approval of the TikTok deal. Now, although it's not yet clear if a TikTok deal to resolve ownership was the United States as well, but a date was not given in the president's post. Uncertainty lingers over a looming government shutdown as Congress adjourns for a recess without agreeing on a short-term funding bill. The Republican-controlled House this morning passed a stopgap measure to fund the government until just before Thanksgiving, but Senate Democrats rejected it. A competing Democratic plan Act subsidies also failed to clear the Senate's 60-vote threshold. Lawmakers spoke about the impasse as the October 1st deadline quickly approaches.
The suggestion by the Democrats that somehow they ought to be able to hijack a continuing resolution to attach $1 trillion of policy and cut things that we just funded a short few weeks ago, like rural hospitals, is completely out of any sort of historical context of what continuing resolutions have been used for in the past.
What we saw on the floor makes it clear the Republicans are following Donald Trump's orders to the letter. Stonewall, scapegoat, shirk responsibility. They're doing exactly what Trump told them to do.
And both chambers are expected to take a week-long recess for Rosh Hashanah. If the current schedule holds, this leaves less than 48 hours to avert a shutdown when they return. The Trump administration is vowing more military action against any vessels attempting to bring drugs into the United States. But critics on Capitol Hill call their actions illegal as the debate over the best way to fight drug smugglers carries on. Here's Christine Frizzell.
It was yet another strike at sea. President Trump posting this video in which he says 3 narco-terrorists from Venezuela were targeted and taken out.
Stop sending Tren de Aragua into the United States. Stop sending drugs into the United States. We knocked off actually 3 boats, not 2, but you saw 2.
Earlier this month, the Department of Homeland Security shared this video. While they've not shared evidence, the Trump administration is vowing the smuggling of deadly drugs like fentanyl and cocaine will no longer be treated as a law enforcement issue. It's now a military one, especially following the designation of Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations.
Interdiction doesn't work because these drug cartels, what they do is they know they're going to lose, 2% of their cargo. They bake it into their economics. What will stop them is when you blow them up, when you get rid of them.
Supporters say this aggressive strategy at sea is working.
The cartels, again, their whole modus operandi is fear. Well, how do you steal that fear? That's through death and destruction.
But the pivot in policy is also being met with criticism from the left and the right, deemed a flagrant violation of U.S. and international law.
That is an enormous expansion of presidential power that the Constitution clearly opposes. And Congress has not been consulted at all. There is no evidence that has been provided whatsoever that they are even striking what they say they're striking.
Senator Rand Paul calling Vice President J.D. Vance's post praising the action a despicable and thoughtless sentiment to glorify killing someone without a trial. In a hearing on Capitol Hill this week, FBI Director Kash Patel said several businesses in China that make the precursor chemicals for fentanyl have been indicted, with routes to Mexican drug cartels and India disrupted for now. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
More than 400 people have been arrested in and around Chicago by immigration officials in the past 10 days. Operation Midway Blitz began on September 8th. ICE officials told the AP it was a solid number and that there is no end date in sight. Well, we are learning today that a New York teenager was arrested last night after bringing a loaded 9mm handgun into their high school. New York City Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch says the NYPD was alerted by another student that the teen in question posted on Instagram yesterday morning that they wanted to, quote, shoot up the school. No shots were fired. No one was injured. The 16-year-old remains anonymous because they are a minor. Officers from around Pennsylvania are paying tribute to their brothers in blue who were tragically killed in that shooting on Wednesday. This morning, York County Regional Police Detectives Cody Becker, Mark Baker, and Isaiah Immenheiser were transported from the coroner's office in a procession. A memorial outside the police department headquarters is now growing.
My heart goes out to all the families, and I just read today where Cody saved a mother and children from a fire. It's like, this guy is just, he didn't deserve this, but it's his job. I understand that.
Police say the officers were ambushed by a 24-year-old who the officers were trying to arrest on suspicion of stalking. Well, 246 suspected human traffickers arrested at once during a 7-day operation in Florida. The Polk County Sheriff's Office announced the results of their Fool Around and Find Out Again sting this afternoon. 230 people were arrested for crimes related to prostitution. Another 16 were taken into custody for attempting to sexually exploit children. Advisors to the CDC are leaving it up to you to get the COVID vaccine this fall. The newly appointed panel unanimously voted against recommending the shot to anyone. They also said anyone who wants one should consult a healthcare provider first. Now, the decision must be approved by the acting CDC director. Previously, the CDC recommended everyone 6 months and up get the latest COVID shot. Today, crews in Southern California are surveying property damage from severe thunderstorms yesterday. Look at these videos: flooding, mudslides, inundated roads. Fire officials say there were no injuries reported, but cars, houses, and power lines were all damaged. The remnants of Tropical Storm Mario are to blame, according to meteorologists, and flood watches are still in place in multiple counties. The Army says 4 soldiers died in a helicopter crash in Washington state this week. An Army Black Hawk helicopter went down during a training mission near Joint Base Lewis McChord late Wednesday. It sparked a wildfire and drew large emergency response. Now, the soldiers were part of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment Airborne. The Army says they were elite warriors who embodied the highest values of the Army. The cause of the crash is still being investigated. Grammy-winning songwriter Brett James was among the 3 people killed in a small one-engine aircraft yesterday. In North Carolina, that crash took place. The plane registered to James crashed near an elementary school. No faculty members or students were injured. Now, James had written more than 800 songs recorded by artists including Taylor Swift, Tim McGraw, and Bon Jovi. One of his most notable hits, Jesus Take the Wheel, sung by Carrie Underwood. The FAA is now investigating the cause of the crash. Officials say human remains found in Washington state may be Travis Decker, the man charged with kidnapping and murdering his 3 young daughters. The U.S. Marshals Service was leading a search this week when remains were found in a remote wooded area south of Leavenworth. Investigators say they never wavered during their manhunt that began in May when Decker's daughters were reported missing after a visit with him. Their bodies later found near a campground.
We are here to seek justice for Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia. We're here to find answers for their family, friends, and the community.
Now, there are pending tests to confirm the identity of the remains. Hyundai is going ahead with plans to expand its Ellabelle plant in Georgia. This despite the recent immigration raid there. The company says it'll spend over $2 billion to increase production capacity. This was first announced in March, but the raid raised questions on if the plan would move forward. ICE agents arrested over 300 South Koreans at that facility on September 4th. Well, if you are a frequent flyer, listen up. There are new rules about what to do with your carry-ons during an emergency evacuation. The Federal Aviation Administration is telling airlines to notify passengers to leave those bags behind, meaning you'll soon start to hear flight crews say this during their in-flight safety announcements. The new instructions come after the FAA says several recent emergency evacuations were slowed down. Look at this video on your screen. They say it's because passengers scrambling off the planes had their suitcases in tow. Now to continuing coverage of the Ryan Routh trial. He's the man accused of attempting to assassinate President Trump in Florida. The schedule has been disrupted because Routh has taken very little time on cross-examination, and prosecutors are being extremely meticulous. The National News Desk, Mike Magnoli reports.
So the prosecution's final witness, their 39th witness, is a female FBI investigator, and she is testifying about all of the physical evidence that was found in Routh's getaway car, that Nissan Xterra. You remember the video from when the Martin County deputies pulled him over. Well, here's the thing. The Nissan Xterra is also where Ryan Routh was living. He parked it at a gas station in South Bay, Florida. So everything that he bought, from food to beverages and prepaid phones, they were rattling around in that vehicle, and then some of that stuff ended up in the sniper's nest on the golf course. So going through that car was like going through a house for the FBI. And prosecutors want the jury to see and hear about every single item that places him at the golf course. Earlier this week, there was hope that Routh would start calling his witnesses on Friday, but the prosecution is entitled to take their time. Remember, they've got to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, so they're leaving no stone unturned for the jury. But the result of them being so thorough and detail-oriented is now Routh won't start calling his witnesses until Monday. He could go through them very quickly, and we could have closing statements on Monday. Now, he chose to act as his own attorney in this trial, and most of what I've seen in cross-exam suggests that he is adrift, although he does ask some questions that are hinting at a theory of his that some of the items of evidence were planted in the Xterra. Nevertheless, at no point during these proceedings has he tried to say, "That wasn't me, you got the wrong guy."
Coming up, new developments in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Who testified today as lawmakers examine a plea deal from 2008? Then a high chance of hurricane this weekend, the areas that could see life-threatening conditions in coastal waters. Plus, reaction from a variety of different people to Jimmy Kimmel's controversial suspension by ABC. We'll be right back. Tens of thousands of people will come to attend the funeral for Turning Point founder Charlie Kirk at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona this Sunday. The political activist was assassinated last week while speaking before thousands of students at Utah Valley University. Charlie Kirk was only 31 and leaves behind a wife and 2 children. His widow Erica, as well as President Trump and Vice President Vance, plan to speak at this funeral at State Farm Stadium in Phoenix on Sunday.
Today we honor those who were held as prisoners of war and those still missing in action. It's a day when we can tell those who are here and those who have not yet returned, you are never forgotten.
Speaking at the Pentagon today, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth honors and remembers the more than 81,000 Americans unaccounted for from World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War, the Cold War, and the Gulf Wars. Many state houses and government buildings across the country are flying the prisoner of war missing in action flag at half-staff today, observing POW MIA Recognition Day. More talk of Epstein on Capitol Hill today as the House Oversight Committee continues its probe into the late convicted sex offender. Today, the panel taking a closer look at the plea deal granted to Epstein back in 2008. Now, the man who negotiated that plea deal, former U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, testifying before the panel at a closed-door deposition. Now, earlier this week, during a Senate hearing, FBI Director Kash Patel accused Acosta's non-prosecution agreement of roadblocking the federal government's ability to hold Epstein accountable, calling it the, quote, original sin in the Epstein case. Democrat Representative Maxwell Frost had this to say about today's interview with Acosta.
Mr. Acosta, at least to us in this deposition, essentially said he didn't have faith in the victims, their stories, and their ability to tell their own story and their own testimony, which is deeply disturbing to all of us sitting in there. Not just that, but it seems like Mr. Acosta really had no idea about what was going on in his own office during this investigation.
Acosta did not answer questions from reporters as he walked into his deposition.
If there's not a list, we'll try to, put together who we think was involved. But right now, the documentation hasn't shown any names of anyone that was human trafficking other than Epstein and Maxwell.
Congressman Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey, who have authored the discharge petition to vote on the release of all Epstein documents, say they plan to read a list of names on the floor of the House put together through accusations from suspected Epstein victims. A federal judge in Florida has struck down President Trump's $15 billion defamation lawsuit against the New York Times. The Washington Post reports U.S. District Judge Stephen Merriday issued a scathing ruling today, criticizing the president for the complaint, which he says was 85 pages long. He called the complaint improper and impermissible under the rules governing civil proceedings in federal court. The judge said a new complaint may be filed within 28 days and must be under 40 pages long. The White House has not yet commented on this. The Supreme Court wants more information before ruling on President Trump's request to be able to fire Federal Reserve Board member Lisa Cook. Now, Chief Justice John Roberts is giving Cook's attorneys until 4 p.m. next Thursday to reply to the president's appeal. The Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court for permission to enforce a policy requiring the sex listed on someone's passport to match their birth certificate. Today, the Justice Department appealed a lower court's ruling letting people choose male, female, or X. The policy was blocked in June after a lawsuit from transgender and non-binary people. Well, Tropical Storm Gabrielle is expected to strengthen into a hurricane later this weekend. Swells from the storm will reach Bermuda tonight and build throughout the weekend, which could bring life-threatening surf and rip currents. But the National Hurricane Center predicts Gabrielle will make a sharp turn early next week back into the Atlantic Ocean, thankfully keeping it from being a major threat to land. We have reporters all across the country, and your neighborhood's covering the issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America, and we start in Massachusetts, where firefighters are getting special training for all kinds of rescue situations.
gloves on, ropes tightened, and the stakes higher than ever.
The ability to do rescues in a high-angle rope environment.
This may not look like a typical day for a first responder, but with a job like this, it's all about expecting the unexpected.
And our organization, Matters, actually puts together these challenges to be able to give these teams the ability to practice and perform together.
All of this to sharpen their skills. Massachusetts Association of Technical Rescue Specialists provides real-life scenarios, so these brave men and women always know how to respond and keep a rescue from turning into a tragedy.
Parents argue the policy, which labels certain clothing as distractions, sends the wrong message.
We need to stop teaching our daughters that they are the problem, that their bodies are the problem, and that it is their responsibility to maintain, manage, and control the emotions and urges of men.
The district says the policy was revised after 2 years of review, including parents, administrators, and the school board.
Our overall goal with this isn't to police style. It's simply to help children understand that if we have a professional standard, it creates a positive learning environment and prepares them for future time in the workplace.
After receiving a $243,000 grant from NASA's Mosaics program, Cal Poly Humboldt's Department of Physics and Astronomy, students are constructing a system that will be used to stabilize a laser to the atomic transitions of rubidium.
And so here what we're doing is we're building a laser spectrometer, basically, is kind of developing a test bed and learning how to stabilize a laser so that when they go to Goddard or to NASA, they will have kind of at least some of the skills they need to kind of contribute more to that research.
Laser stabilization is a key part of the atomic clocks and the atom interferometers, which are being used to develop novel gravity radiometers that will measure tiny variations in gravitational fields in space.
Coming up, some liberals taking a softer tone towards Charlie Kirk in the wake of his assassination, right after the break. This week, ABC pulled one of their biggest stars off the airwaves. Disney and ABC executives suspending Jimmy Kimmel for comments critics argue grossly misrepresent the politics of the suspected shooter of Charlie Kirk. The National News Desk, Kayla Gaskins, reports on how people are reacting.
Democratic lawmakers and fellow late-night hosts pouring out support for Jimmy Kimmel.
It is absolutely outrageous.
This is just despicable.
We are all Jimmy Kimmel.
Kimmel had suggested the suspect in Charlie Kirk's assassination could be a MAGA supporter. While the motives officially remain under investigation, the evidence released so far actually points in the opposite direction, spurring FCC Chairman Brendan Carr to argue Kimmel was playing into a dangerous false narrative spun on the left. Carr had this warning for ABC.
We can do this the easy way or the hard way. The FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at.
Hours later, ABC suspended Kimmel.
That
is blatant censorship.
Critics pointing out those outraged over Kimmel were quiet when previous voices were silenced or canceled over politics, like Donald Trump, Roseanne Barr, Dave Chappelle, Megyn Kelly, and J.K. Rowling. Meanwhile, celebrities expressing sympathy for Charlie Kirk's death, facing backlash, including Jamie Lee Curtis.
I disagreed with him on almost every point I ever heard him say.
Yeah.
But I believe he was a man of faith.
Mm.
And I hope in that moment when he died that he felt connected to his faith.
It's no secret that I'm a Christian.
Broadway star Kristen Chenoweth made to answer for sharing an Instagram story expressing sadness and praying for the Kirk family.
What were you hoping to convey with that post?
I had a human moment of reflection just right then.
And Rainn Wilson, who starred in The Office, appalled at conversations he's hearing behind closed doors.
I spoke to a couple of, let's say, some liberal friends last night at an event, and they were like, you won't find me shedding any tears. And someone else was like, oh, well, there was a little bit of a kind of a good riddance thing. And it's like, guys, no.
Yeah, I know.
No.
I know.
We cannot think or talk that way.
Nah.
FCC Chairman Brendan Carr saying ABC's talk show, The View, might be next in the FCC's line of sight. The show's hosts have been highly critical of President Trump over the years. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
We're bringing you breaking news right now. Police are investigating after an ABC 10 TV station in Sacramento, California was shot at, according to authorities. No injuries were reported. We are tracking this developing story closely. We'll bring you the latest details as they come in. Stay with us. We'll be right back. American sprinter Noah Lyles has bested the field again. Days after coming in third in the 100-meter dash, Lyles won his fourth consecutive 200-meter race at the World Championships in Tokyo, tying Usain Bolt for the most ever. And history also made on the women's side. American Melissa Jefferson-Wooden won both the 100 and 200-meter sprints at the World Championships, making her the first American woman to ever accomplish that feat. That's all the time we have for now. Thanks for joining us. I'm Taylor Murray.